Yo, what's going on, guys? SMH Super Mario Hoops back with some more hoops. And today we are going to be discussing one of the most under the radar players from about a decade ago. And this player actually has been making headlines recently with the Milwaukee Bucks winning the 2021 NBA championship. And this player is Brandon Jennings. Now, of course, Brandon Jennings wasn't on the team that won the championship just a few weeks ago, but he was recently celebrating with the team. He was at the parade. Obviously, the city and the fans of Milwaukee were respecting him, and they really fall behind him a lot because he's one of the iconic figures from that city and that franchise. But other people who don't really see it like that have kind of been hating on him, saying he's just a bum, trying to get some attention, and just trying to make a name off of one meme from about 2013. But we're going to be discussing today how good Brandon Jennings actually was. So without further ado, let's get right into it. So starting off with the Milwaukee Bucks, he played there for 4 seasons from 2009 to 2013. And in these 4 seasons, he averaged 17 points, just under 6 assists, about 3.5 rebounds, and 1.5 steals per game on about 40% from the field, 36% from 3, and 81% from the free throw line in his splits. In all 4 years, he averaged a minimum of 15 points, 4.5 assists, 3 rebounds, and 1 steal. And yes, he may have never been an all-star during those years, but he was easily one of the biggest snubs for nearly each one. In fact, Bleacher Report listed him as the top guard snub in the Eastern Conference for the 2010, 2012, and 2013 All-Star game. They didn't in 2011 because he missed several games due to an injury. And if you don't think Bleacher Report is reliable, you can also check Brew Hoops or SB Nation, even ESPN, where all of them acknowledge Jennings as being a member of the All-Star snub teams during those seasons. Before analyzing the major years he was snubbed, I will say that I have said on this channel probably 100 times by now that this is why the All-Star team should be extended to 15 players instead of 12, because there will be a lot less snubs in my opinion. But starting off with 2010, the All-Star game had selected Joe Johnson to replace Allen Iverson when the Hawks already had Al Horford selected and no Bucks players were. Ironically, in the playoffs, they played and it went to 7 games, with the Hawks being the 3 seed and the Bucks being the 6 seed. And this was a series in which Jennings was playing right up to par with Joe Johnson as the 2 best players in the matchup all series long in Jennings' rookie year, where he put up a dazzling 34 points, 3 rebounds, and 3 assists on 14 of 25 shooting from the field and 4 of 6 from three-pointer in his opening debut. That was the 4th most points in a rookie playoff debut and only 2 shy of the record of 36 points, which is a tiebreaker between Kareem Abdul-Jabbar in 1970 and Derrick Rose in 2009. In terms of 2012, though, this is what I think was the biggest sighting of an all-star snub for Jennings, and this is where I feel he easily should have been an all-star. You know, some of the others can be debated, but without a doubt in my mind, he should have made it this year. Once again, Joe Johnson made the team over Jennings, but this season he had less points per game, less assists per game, lower box creation, and was a worse defender that season, as well as missing a handful of games. This was extremely perplexing because they awarded Johnson and not Josh Smith, who was having the best season this year and should have been the all-star from the Atlanta Hawks if they were to have any, even over guys like Chris Bosh and Luol Deng. They also chose Deron Williams for the All-Star game over Brandon Jennings, even though Jennings had similar shooting splits on only 2 less points per game, with the remaining 4 base per game stats being split 2-2 between both players. Although the Nets were extremely bad and underwhelming this year as well, while the Bucks were surprisingly knocking on the door of the playoffs after Andrew Bogut, their second best player, missed 54 games from a fractured ankle. Even Rondo was a replacement over Jennings when the Celtics already had Paul Pierce on the team, and Jennings was truly a more efficient offensive player this year. And then Andre Iguodala, who had nowhere near the burden of carrying a team as Jennings did and averaged only about 12 points per game. But apparently, since the 76ers finished as the 8th seed and Milwaukee Bucks finished as the 9th seed, I guess that was the X factor, is just winning. In terms of 2013, it was also an all-star worthy season for Jennings. Now, the bench guards that could be argued were Kyrie Irving and Jrue Holiday. For Kyrie Irving, as we know, he is the more decorated player all time, but in this season, the Bucks were truly a much better team than the Cavaliers, and at this point in time, Jennings was the better playmaker and facilitator than Kyrie. Kyrie was slightly more efficient on offense and scored more points per game, but Jennings was easily the better defender this season too. In terms of Drew Holiday, this selection was pretty poor personally. I mean, Holiday at this point was still a very solid defender, but not to the degree that he is today and that he was playing this whole playoff run this year. He also averaged the same amount of points on worse efficiency and was a less efficient distributor that season than Jennings, with a 2.1 assist to turnover ratio to Jennings' 2.6. Also, just like Jennings compared to Kyrie, the Bucks were a better team than the 76ers this year. I honestly think that the biggest reason Jennings didn't get much love this season is the fact that the Bucks had Monte Ellis for a full year. Even though Jennings was a more efficient scorer and playmaker this year than Monte, along with a higher contribution to the team's winning, I mean, Ellis was still a really good player with the Bucks that it's almost like the league wanted to cancel each other out with these two players for both being elite guards, whereas Kyrie and Drew Holiday didn't really have that alongside them. Once the 2013 playoffs rolled around and Jennings infamously called for the Bucks in 6, he was looking ready to make the most of that moment. And as he dropped 26 points on solid efficiency in a tough Game 1 loss to Miami, this is probably the highlight of the series for him and the Milwaukee Bucks. Now, this Bucks team obviously wasn't perfect, and that's why they were the 8th seed. But maybe if the NBA was in a different atmosphere, different world, say where street ball is where the whole game is predicated off of, then I don't think it's even too crazy to say the Bucks would be championship contenders, because Brandon Jennings and Monte Ellis in the same team, I mean, come on, that's just extreme. And that speaks volume about the entertainment that they provided the fans with. As we know, though, they would go on to get swept by the Miami Heat, and then Jennings was signed and traded to Detroit in exchange for Brandon Knight and Chris Middleton after the Bucks chose not to match the offer he signed with the Pistons. Now, in Detroit, Jennings was still playing like a top 10 point guard in the league at the time. The first season was a bit of a rough shooting year for Jennings, but as a distributor was arguably his best. About 7.6 assists per game on only 2.7 turnovers for a 2.81 assist to turnover ratio. To put that into perspective, the only players to do that this season while scoring on the level that Brandon Jennings did were DeJounte Murray and Chris Paul. And even both of them were only about 1 point per game above Jennings in the league, where today is much different than how it was about 7 years ago. That I'd be so confident as saying Jennings would even be a more prolific volume scorer in today's game among the players that were that efficient at distributing the basketball along with scoring at that level. In the next season, though, 2014-2015 is when things start to get really tough for Jennings. He was easily going to make the All-Star team by a majority of people's assessment, averaging 15.4 points per game, 6.6 assists per game, 2.5 rebounds per game on 40% from the field, 36% from 3, and 84% from the free throw line, which was actually, in terms of true shooting, his most efficient season of his career, while still averaging a steal per game and the best season in terms of win share contribution per game as well. In terms of efficiency as a distributor this season, Jennings' season compared to the most recent NBA season, only Chris Paul would be in a class with him. Jennings would go on to lead the Pistons to a 7-game winning streak that changed really the culture of their season, including a game winner during the winter months to turn their season around against the San Antonio Spurs, and once the team cut ties with the living Detroit disappointment in Josh Smith. But during that stretch, Jennings actually averaged 19.3 points per game, 5.9 assists per game, 2.9 rebounds per game, 1.3 steals per game, on shooting splits of 48.7% from the field, 42.9% from 3, and 87.5% from the free throw line in just 26.9 minutes per game. In terms of his per 36 stats, because he was also getting a lot less time during these years with the Detroit Pistons, that's approximately 26 points, 8 assists, 4 rebounds, just under 2 steals, and remember, on nearly 49%, 43%, and 88% splits. During that crucial stretch, he literally saved the Pistons season at that point and was even playing better basketball for the entire season's worth of MVP Steph Curry, just to put into perspective how great he was playing during this stretch. But then, sadly, on January 24th, 2015, which was also my birthday, was the night Brandon Jennings, in his former team's arena against the Milwaukee Bucks, would go on to tear his Achilles. This injury was so devastating because it comes right after the voting for the All-Star game, and once again, he missed the cut with arguably his best chance. Players such as Jeff Teague and Kyle Korver made it simply off team success, and Jennings was playing better and more deserving of an All-Star spot than both of them up until the injury. Jennings would not return until the final days of the 2015 year, but was slowly integrated into the lineup. When asked about his return, Stan Van Gundy, who had a role as both the head coach and as an executive at the time, said that Jennings would still be a huge part to the team going forward and was actually looking forward to the future when Jennings was back on the court. He lied. Jennings didn't get a single opportunity to play more minutes than he averaged the year before until his final game as a Piston. In that game, he had 16 points, 3 rebounds, 1 assist on 6 of 12 shooting from the field and 4 of 8 shooting from 3. This was also the only game that he started in Detroit that year. And then he was packaged with his former Bucks teammate Ersan Ilyasova to Orlando for Tobias Harris. And this is honestly what I think killed the firepower behind Brandon Jennings in the NBA. Stan Van Gundy betrayed the trust barrier that he set out for Jennings literally less than 2 months before ultimately having him sent out. This guy was still just 26 years old and was even considered the savior of the Pistons season by Stan Van Gundy prior to the trade due to his heroics in early 2015. And he would later show more signs of great playmaking in spurts with the Magic, the Knicks, the Wizards, and the Bucks in his second stint there. But once he was traded there with a reputation built that year that he would only be like a backup point guard, struggling to find his rhythm, he never really got a legit opportunity again in the NBA. He served as a backup for Elfrid Payton in Orlando, the backup for Derrick Rose in New York, the backup for John Wall in Washington, and the backup for Eric Bledsoe in Milwaukee. And you could argue that he could have been a better use than both Payton and Bledsoe in those positions, considering how they played in the regular season and the playoffs. But the opportunity was never presented because of how quickly Stan Van Gundy just gave up on him. Of course, Reggie Jackson was playing well to make Jennings possibly more expendable, but it just goes to show that the NBA is a tough business and how an organization can say one thing and then just do the other, which hurts a player or team's future. Even in limited time with Detroit that year, though, Jennings scored in double digits 6 times over 23 games, and 2 of which he cracked the 20-point mark. The rest of his NBA career, I'm not really going to touch on. I mean, I listed the teams that he played for, and like I said, he showed some strong moments even in these places. Like in New York, he was a great true point guard for them, and when he first returned to Milwaukee in 2018, his first game consisted of a performance with 16 points, 12 assists, 8 rebounds on 5 of 9 shooting from the field, 3 of 6 shooting from 3, 3 of 3 shooting from the free throw line, and almost a 78% true shooting performance, all in under 24 minutes. And that game was literally just 3 years ago, which makes it almost a crime that Brandon Jennings is not on an NBA roster right now. Because you can't convince me that he wouldn't be a top 10 player on any certain team. Just by watching the playoffs this year with the rotations cut down to about 8 or 9 key players, I still always see at least one guy on every team that I know good and well Brandon Jennings could be a better use than. I mean, you guys watch your favorite teams play. There's got to be some players that you think Jennings could be better than for you guys. As a Bulls fan, I'm easily taking him over Denzel Valentine. And even Thomas Satoransky is just so cringeworthy to watch sometimes that it makes me wish that we had a guy like Brandon Jennings who could just pour it on when he's on fire as opposed to him. Teams that are literally trying to lose, why not sign a guy like Jennings, just let him show that he belongs in the NBA? Like the Rockets, the Magic, the Thunder, someone in that ballpark. They could take a chance on him. It can't really go any more wrong than they could possibly envision. At this point, he's been away from the game for so long, he won't single-handedly carry your team to prosperity or something, but he can still show his worth, and I still think there's a lot of game left for Jennings because he's a true hooper. But let's say he doesn't ever come back and play in the NBA. Well, how good would his prime years be in the modern-day league? Now, similar to a guy like Terry Rozier today, he was never truly the most efficient scorer of the basketball, but that really didn't matter, because he was a difficult shot taker and maker, and that's the biggest reason he was must-see TV. And still shot around 40% with that being the case, with the Bucks offense being pretty much on his shoulders. Of course, they got Monte Ellis in the midway through the 2011-2012 season, but like I mentioned earlier, Jennings was the prime facilitator and playmaker on the team with by far the highest box creation. So essentially, he was the motor of the team's offense for every year in Milwaukee, as well as those years in Detroit before his Achilles injury. In terms of his fit in today's NBA, regarding Jennings' first 5 seasons in the league, he made the top 20 leaderboards for most three-point attempts in 4 of the first 5 seasons. The only year that he didn't was 2010-2011, where he missed 19 games due to surgery on a fractured left foot. And the only other player to do so for 4 of those 5 seasons was Wesley Matthews. And in terms of those 5 years, Brandon Jennings attempted 1,997 three-pointers, and Wesley Matthews was at 1,816. Jennings did shoot at 35%, while Wesley Matthews was about 39.4%. but realized that he was the prime shot creator in Milwaukee, while Matthews is more of a catch-and-shoot player for pretty much his whole career. He also finished top 25 in three-pointers attempted per game in all the first 6 seasons. The only other player to do so for all those seasons was Stephen Curry and Jamal Crawford. Over that span of time, Stephen Curry averaged about 6.5 three-pointers attempted per game on 44%, and Brandon Jennings attempted about 5.4 three-pointers a game on 35%. Jamal Crawford at about 5.3 three-pointers a game on also 35%. Now, obviously, Steph Curry looks like he's in a class in his own, but as we know, he's the greatest shooter of all time. But Jennings still averaged more three-pointers attempted per game for 2 of the 6 seasons than Curry, and 3 of those 6 seasons than Jamal Crawford. And in that 5-year span where we analyzed for Jennings' three-pointers attempted, he had the second most of any player throughout that time, only behind Curry. And Steph only had 61 more total attempts over that time. So for Brandon Jennings, a guy who averaged about 16.6 points per game, 6.2 assists per game, 3.2 rebounds per game, and 1.4 steals per game over the course of time before he tore his Achilles, in no way, shape, or form is it crazy to think that he couldn't put up a stat line like 22 points per game, about 8.5 assists a game, and 4 rebounds a game in today's era, along with the 1.5 steals per game like he originally did for several years in Milwaukee. I also believe that in the NBA today, where there's more foul baiting among perimeter players and strictly defensive rules that make it harder to avoid committing a foul as well, I think that Jennings' all-around efficiency would rise too, and he would take advantage of that. As we know, he was always a high-volume three-point shooter, so this would likely help him in a really effective way. I mean, the only player from his best years that was getting up more three-pointers attempted than him was Steph Curry, so I think that's pretty elite three-point shooting class, if you ask me. To play it safe, I'd say about 44% from the field and 39% from three-pointers. As his free throw would obviously be a stronger emphasis with the defensive rules, I'd place that at about 85%. So a guy that could average about 22, 8.5, and 4 on 44, 39, 85 splits as an efficient facilitator, shooter, and scorer, who always had a lot of off-ball capabilities on offense as well, and was even a better defender than a great deal of point guards today that you see in the league, I think he would be an all-star caliber season even in these days. Now, of course, it's a matter of if he actually gets selected and not snubbed like he did back then, but I think he could definitely make about 2 all-star teams, maybe even more. Clearly, he was well before his era with the three-point volume, so maybe that has a positive impact on his game in a strong way like it did for Steph. Obviously, it'd be crazy to say that he'd be more successful than Steph. I'm not even saying that at all, but maybe what I think is that 2 all-star teams could turn into 4 or 5, depending on how much he ultimately gains from that style of play. And as we know, major media brands were pushing him at the top of their list for all-star snubs in 4 different seasons in his first 6 years. Sometimes you either just get unlucky or simply snubbed. I mean, it's happened to guys like CJ McCollum, Byron Scott, or even Jennings' former teammate Monte Ellis. And this is why he was still always a great player, not just for one night as a rookie in a wild 55-point in 3/4 game, but Brandon Jennings was a great NBA player. In terms of his draft class, we know he doesn't compare to Steph or Harden or Blake or DeMar DeRozan, and I think it's fair to put Holiday over him, although in other circumstances that could even change. So we're talking about a guy that very well might have been a top 5 player in his draft class. So when you saw Brandon Jennings celebrating with the Milwaukee Bucks in their championship ceremony and the parade because he used to play there and made an all-time legendary prediction that will remain in history, don't disrespect him because he's a legend and he's iconic to the city of Milwaukee. He was a very good player there, and he's also a great icon for NBA culture. I mean, aside from the Bucks and 6 meme, Jennings was actually the first player to choose going overseas as a route prior to the NBA before college. This inspired guys like Emmanuel Mudiay and LaMelo Ball to follow in his footsteps. Also, while rehabbing from his Achilles injury in the 2015-2016 season, he became the first person to actually use the G League as a means of injury recovery prior to coming back to full strength and health. If he had the accolades I mentioned in today's era with the cultural impact he had not only for the Bucks but also the league in terms of global and development league impacts, I think there's even a case that he could potentially end up in the Hall of Fame on the right given year in the right timeline. He had the talent, just sometimes it takes some luck, and he didn't always have that by his side when he currently played, and it would just kind of need a little bit more when he played in today's era if that was the case. There's no other way to say it, but this guy was an iconic and a great NBA player that I will never forget, and neither should you. And that's a big reason why he was one of my favorite players to watch growing up as well. So all I'm asking is to give Brandon Jennings your respect, because he laid the foundation of Milwaukee for Giannis, for Middleton, and so on. I mean, none of this is possible without him, and was always one of the most exciting NBA players as well. You can ask the current Bucks, you can ask the current staff of the Milwaukee Bucks, all those guys. They'll tell you that Brandon Jennings laid the foundation for this team. If you don't know about Brandon Jennings or don't remember him and he was before your time, look him up and just watch some of his old Bucks and Pistons highlights before the torn Achilles, because he truly was a box office level player, and you're going to like what you see. But guys, I hope you all enjoyed this video. If you did, be sure to like, comment, and subscribe. Like I said, Brandon Jennings was one of my favorite players of all time. And in terms of like my top 10, I think that he probably has the least decorated career, because he's just someone that naturally, when watching him, he was always someone I had to pay attention to and I had to watch, because he was just so entertaining. There's no other way to put it. And that's why this guy, he's almost like a street ball player, and he's just so fun to watch. But guys, hope you all enjoyed the video. If you did, be sure to like, comment, subscribe, and hit the notification bell as well for more videos to come. But I hope that you guys enjoyed this video, and I think it's going to do it for me. I'm out. Peace.